Hello and welcome to our daily sketching routine. Today is Friday, August 30th, 2024, and I'm going to continue working on this sketch from the 26th. I'll put a link to it in the description. But originally it was how to hold a pen for sketching, and with that in mind, I'm going to use a few different pens. I'm going to use a thin pen. This one is a Bic Intensity, but basically it's very thin. And then my usual like medium point felt tip Papermate. And then there's this Sharpie marker, which is like a brush. And then start off by creating a border. And talk about my process and my thought process, as well as drawing. And yeah, in the original video, if you want to follow along, it was talking about how to hold the pen in different ways. And this was from imagination, because that was part of the theme, was how to sketch from imagination. And this might be a longer video because sometimes that's what you need, is to take your time. But yeah, this week's theme has been about the basics, and so I'll keep that in mind. But I will start a 5-minute timer, and just to stay focused, although again it might be a longer video. All right. So a few things. One thing is that for these videos I tend to use a pen, so you could call it pen and ink style. And part of that is I just got used to doing that. I did it years ago, and I like it, but that's kind of a topic for another video. But also it just happens to look better on camera. It shows up better. But I mean, obviously it depends on what you're doing, what you're going for. But as I begin to sketch, I'm going to start with this thin pen. And sometimes it's good to do that if you're still figuring out the picture and don't really want to use a pencil. Like I usually will use a mechanical pencil to sketch out, but sometimes I don't want to. Partly because it's a preference thing, and it's sometimes it's an extra step that I don't really feel like doing to do a pencil. But yeah, it just depends. But for this sketch, I'm gonna just use a thinner pen in order to figure out detail. So there's that. So I'll be using this at first for a while, just to figure out what's going on here. And then as I do that, the other thing is so this is not from reference, this is just from memory or imagination. And if I'm going in, like right now, which is also from, I'm not using reference right now, I don't feel like it. It's sometimes I like to just challenge myself in that way, and it's something that I'm practicing. Then what I tend to do is work on the shadows like this, because I already know that I'm not going to put a ton of detail in the shadows, but like the shape of it is the most important thing, and like the value of the shadow, how dark it is. And so I'll just kind of do that, and as I do that, I think about the composition. So for example, in general, the lighting will come from this side, from the left side of this sketch. However, you can control the depth, the illusion of depth, by how you shade it. So like I might not put a ton of shadows back here because I want it to look further away, and that's called atmospheric perspective. And also, as I start to add some shadows, like I know I want the foreground to have more detail, but I keep the shadows pretty basic, and I don't try to draw a whole lot. I'm just mapping out the shadows and seeing what emerges, so that kind of becomes the reference, I suppose. Just letting the pen marks create details. All right, that's 5 minutes. Also, in terms of composition, it's good to have depth, so that like in this would be called the foreground, but then you have like the near foreground. So stuff that's going off of the page. It's good. So that's a composition trick. And then this horse rider is part of the foreground. So again, keeping a pretty loose grip, sometimes going into detail if something emerges. And then this is the middle ground here where the castle is. And I'm just gonna shade it. Part of that is because since I'm using ink, I'm gonna use that to fix the drawing. because I'm not going to erase anything, so I just kind of use it to partly to for the composition, to combine the shapes, but also to fix drawing, but at the same time keeping in mind the values, so that if I make this really dark, it's gonna change the whole composition and change the whole lighting situation. So I can see that this could be good for like a lake right here. So I'm gonna leave that, because sometimes you can just leave it blank like this, but it'll probably have some reflection and everything. But again, I also like to work on the picture as a whole. Don't get too stuck on any one thing, because sometimes that'll create more work than is necessary. If you work on kind of keep everything at the same spot, one, I find that there's more harmony that way, and then sometimes you save yourself some work because you don't really need to draw as much. And then it's also good for when you step away, which I recommend, to because your eyes get used to the picture, so that when you step away from it, it feels more motivating if a lot of the pictures kind of going at the same pace. And I started using the term like committing to the picture. That just sort of came to me from making these videos and talking about my process. So I like that though, like this idea of knowing at what stage you're at. So if you're still at the exploration stage, then just keep it there as long as you need to. If you're at the detail stage, then it's a different mindset. Like right now, I'm not detailing it. I'm starting to add detail, but I would call this more refining. I'm starting to refine the picture. I wouldn't even really call it detail. All right, that's another, I thought it was 5 minutes, not quite. Also, the other thing is I'm leaving myself enough room so that, for example, this is a horse, like a back view with someone riding, and I'm probably going to look this up for reference, although so I want to leave myself enough room to adjust it, but then still keeping the same look. So that's another 5 minutes. I'll start another timer, because one, it saves you from having to draw too much, and that kind of goes with this idea of like overwork. You don't need to overwork the picture. So that's, I like this pen. It's pretty cool for doing this kind of thing. The other thing I wanted to talk about is I'm keeping in mind that like a picture like this, a sketch, I'm thinking I want to take this into Photoshop and do a painting from it. And so a lot of the way that I am going to sketch this keeps in mind there's sort of reminders to myself of how I might want to paint it. So for example, this area will be shadowed, although when you paint it, you're not going to use black ink. You're going to use some kind of color. So the important thing for me is to know what the value is and what the shape is, because when you paint it, that's what you're going to be thinking about. Well, you don't want to be thinking about the drawing as much as like the color, because that's its own challenge, is the coloring and the painting of it, and the you just want to be thinking about painting basically. So you want to solve a lot of the issues for value and for drawing at this point. And then of course when you're painting you can add stuff, but it's good to have something to fall back on. Let this be like the blueprint. But again, at the same time, if you know that you're going to paint it, you don't have to draw everything, because again, that's too much drawing. And that's kind of the thing with me, is I don't want to draw more than I need to. And it's different for every picture. But I think for beginners to drawing or painting, there's this kind of misconception that you have to draw a lot. It's not that, it's that it needs to be the correct thing. So an example would be when you're playing music, you don't have to hit every note, which actually makes it kind of a boring song or composition. It's really about what is the correct note, and then what you leave out is just as important as what you put in to the sketch or the song. The other thing is shape is important. So I'm using the same size pen because the size of the pen also matters. So if I move to like a medium tip and start sketching, it's going to affect the look of it. So I'm not going to do that right now. So I want to basically take it as far as I can with one size of pen, but then also the shape, the size of the shapes. So for example, this could look like thin grass, but because it's pretty big here in the foreground, it doesn't look like this is bigger than these, which are like trees in the middle ground here. And that has to do with the size of the pen stroke and also the shape. All right, that was 5 minutes. I'll start another one. I'd like to keep it between 20 and 30 minutes at the most, although sometimes I think my longest video is 40 minutes. Sometimes it's good. It just takes a while to render and upload. That's the main thing, and plus just attention span. But yeah, like why does like this pen stroke looks the same as this, but why doesn't it look exactly the same, or why does it give the impression that that's trees in the middle ground versus grass in the foreground? And it has to do with the illusion of it and also the shape of it. Because if I were to draw this shape right here, like right here, it would probably look like bushes or something. So the way I like to work is take it as far as you can. Just let the sketch and your imagination and your memory sort of bring out the picture, and then that will have a lot of your personality in there and your ideas, and I like that. Like, I find that more interesting. And then you can feel better about looking at reference, because it'll just inform your idea. But yeah, I would keep using the same pen until you've gotten as far as you need to with it. Like with this back area or the background, I like this. I probably wouldn't shade it too much, because if I am gonna paint it, which I'm pretty sure I'm gonna do, partly because it seems interesting with this picture, and also for like a future video about digital painting. With stuff like this, a lot of that you want to leave to you want the paint to take care of that. So again, you're making up the lighting, so you want to lead the eye, and you want to give yourself notes for a painting, but you don't have to paint this. You could just make it a good sketch. And so you still want to lead the eye so that people look at this, and then next they can look at this. And give yourself enough leeway so that you can look up some reference, not to make your sketch look like the reference, but that, again, you're communicating what you want to communicate. Mainly, you just want people to understand what you're going for, and let that dictate like how you draw it. I mean, if it gets your idea across, then you don't have to do more than you need to. It just reminds me of, and this is kind of a different topic, but this idea, like, especially with modern movies, I've noticed, is they feel like every scene has to have a gazillion things going on, and I don't like that, because they all seem the same and they don't stand out, versus some older movies where maybe it was the kind of the style of movie making, but also part of the limitations, since they had to make everything by hand. That's 5 minutes. I'll start another one. And so they had to be more minimal about showing stuff, but then it made the scene more memorable to me, and it, yeah, like you could take in more detail. And so I kind of just approach drawing that way, where you don't have to, like, you can have empty areas, especially if you are going to paint. A lot of times, I mean, the whole point of painting is the color and the value. So those are just some thoughts I have, which maybe I'll do videos where I'm just kind of talking about just my philosophy about stuff like that. But yeah, I mean, let me know if you're interested, but I'll talk about it anyway. But just since I am talking about that, I mean, I'm incredibly thankful for the likes and subscribers and comments. I really am. Because I would be doing this anyway, but not necessarily recording or making a channel, but I feel like there's value in it, so that's why. But yeah, I'm starting to wrap the sketch up. But before I do that, let's kind of go through the different pens since I brought it up. Yeah, like what could happen is in the foreground I might do this. This part I might like look up reference and like kind of add details that enhance the picture. That's one way of doing it, and it also gives me ideas for when I am painting, like the brush strokes. Again, it's all about leading the eye. So even in the foreground, which I'm calling this the foreground here, you can lead the eye that way so that you could have like some depth here, and like you're having depth right here. So there's that. But then you can also use this, like a brush, and again, this could be helpful for, like, look how sparingly, you see, like it only takes a little bit to like lead the eye. But that also can be a reminder for when you're painting, to how to do it. I mean, even within this figure on the horse, I mean, that, like if I were to add it to the tail here, this is supposed to be the tail of the horse, it would flatten it. Like, it's just interesting how that is. So sometimes you'll see some interesting things. Like I kind of like that this looks like a cloud. So I might just make, and part of that is the composition. Like I could make these trees, but then I feel like that would compete with this castle because I like the scale of this castle. So I'm just gonna make that clouds, but then when I paint it, the color is gonna, because if the colors blend, like let's say this is kind of bluish, and you make this, like that also is part of it. But again, that's another topic. So yeah, that's like several, see, like I like this being leaves. So yeah, there's several topics that might be fun to explore for you. But that's another 5 minutes, and before I sign off, thanks again for supporting the channel, and until next time, keep on sketching.